Hey, welcome to the November edition of the How to Podcast series. What are we doing this month? We're doing an episode every single day. For the month of November, yeah, that's a lot of podcast episodes, Dave. And what I want to do is I want to shine a light on amazing podcasters who are doing great things in podcasting. I want you to meet some of my friends. Now, these are friends that I've met through this podcast. These are friends that I've met by being on their show. These are friends that have been at our meetups. These are friends who I cherish and I think are people that you need to know. The best way to grow podcasting is word of mouth marketing, telling people about people's shows. That's what this is all about for the month of November. It's all word of mouth. You're going to hear from them come on and talk about their podcast. You're going to hear clips from shows. You'll have links to go follow these amazing people. And I want to give you a variety of different amazing podcasters for you to fall in love with. And you found the right spot. This is November. It's all about the listeners. It's all about you. And I want to shine a light on some amazing people. Are you ready? Okay. Let's jump into this because I think you're going to love this. And I'm glad you're here. And what I can't wait for is the day when you and I get to interact. I can't wait for us to meet each other at our meetups, online, through the link in the notes attached to this episode, where you and I can meet each other and I can be there in your corner to support you. I would love to do that. So here's another example of one of my friends at their show, and I want you to fall in love with them just as much as I have. Okay? Welcome to the How to Podcast series. It's November. It's National Podcast Post Month. It's 30 episodes in 30 days, and I want you to meet some of my favorite people in this world called podcasting. It's all about them. It's not about me. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Check out one of my friends. You ready? You ready? Okay, here we go. All right, so if you are a nerd and you love all nerdom, Tim Truax has a podcast called The Nerd Room. Tim is also the host and main head honcho of Pod Summit that we just had in Calgary in September of 2024. Coming back in 2025, everybody. And Tim put on a great podcasting event with a lot of people from Canada there, and he's a great human being. He's a great team behind him. He pulled all this off. He still has a job. He's still working. And on top of all that, and being a podcaster, he created a podcast conference for us. My wife and I flew out from Ontario to Calgary, and we had a great time. Tim and his team put on a spectacular show, and I have a lot of praise for Tim. And thank you, Tim, for what you've done for podcasting in Canada. You are a true light in the podcasting space here north of the border. And I know the U.S. get all the attention, but here in Canada, we're trying to carve out our little spot, right? And Tim did a great job. Tim has a podcast called The Nerd Room. And basically, he was on the podcast here a while ago, and his wife has him put all of his nerd-related products into a room in the house, and it's aptly called The Nerd Room. And so he podcasts about all things nerd. And if you love movies and pop culture and all kinds of things, anything nerdy, that's definitely the podcast for you to check out. It's The Nerd Room with Tim Truax. So I thought I'd give you a little taste of it. And he talks a little bit about Pod Summit here at the beginning. And he had to take a little delay from his show to do all this stuff for Pod Summit. And he's here talking about that, getting back on the mic. And here's a little taste of his show. I'd love for you to share this out with people. And think about 2025. And if you're in Canada or Northern US or whatever, definitely come out to Pod Summit. Come on. We need you there. Come and meet some great Canadian podcasters, because we do exist. And I'd love for you to come be a part of that event. So Tim does a great event, does a great podcast. Here's The Nerd Room with Tim Truax. Hope you enjoy, and please share. Tim, can you please do the cool intro, Tim? I love your intro. Here we go.
And now, on with the show. You are listening to a Nerd Room podcast production. We, the Nerd. Bunch of nerds.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Nerd Room. We talk all things Star Wars, Marvel, DC, and beyond. This episode number 406, where I'll be discussing a bit of everything. Test 1212. Is this on? It is your host of the Nerd Room podcast. It is, of course, Tim, and I am back at the microphone after the longest hiatus in Nerd Room history, clocking in at almost 2 freaking months since we put out an episode in this feed. I can tell you one thing, I have really missed this, but I also really needed a little bit of a break. And it has nothing to do with podcasting. It has nothing to do with the content, because I'm loving what I'm seeing out here in the nerd world. It has everything to do with balancing out, and there's a giant ironic piece behind this, balancing out a brand new podcast project that I had been working on for a year and a half. I spoke a bit about this at the end of August in the build to Pod Summit YYC 2024. This is a podcast conference / event that myself, my wife, put together over a year and a half of working in the background here and there. You guys would have seen it if you followed me on Instagram or social media. We posted a little bit. We talked a little bit about here. But as we got into the end of August, early September, I found myself completely overwhelmed and consumed with life and Pod Summit. And unfortunately, the one thing that did fall off was nerd and podcasting. And the absolute insanity and irony behind that being the thing that finally pushed me to take a little bit of a break behind the microphone is absurd. And I recognize that. But if I couldn't put my heart, soul, and everything behind this microphone and into these episodes, I said, I got to pause and focus on this other podcast journey and project. And man, was it something else. I am so proud of what we put together at Pod Summit. And I want you guys to get a little bit more familiar with what I'm doing over there, because I think it's going to have a really cool impact on this podcast and what I'm able to put together there. Go over to @Pod Summit, check out our sizzle reel. I got to interview Chris Van Vliet, who's a big podcasting legend for me. He's someone that inspires me. He's someone that helped me get back into the world of wrestling. I got to sit beside him and interview him at the summit that we put together. It was absolutely incredible. That episode, that interview will actually be dropping on this feed and another feed in the not too distant future. But I got to do so many cool things, meet so many amazing people. And I don't want to tell a quick story here just behind, why I did Pod Summit, why I eventually and ultimately had to take a little bit of a break from the microphone here, is that I wanted to do something that was very community-based, rooted in that community aspect of things. And I think I've talked about this before, but this podcast was always that. It was rooted in community. It was something that I built with the guys to try to create a community where we could share a common love and passion for pop culture, and specifically Star Wars, Marvel, DC. And Pod Summit was fundamentally based on the exact same thing. And that's why it was such a passion project for me, because it was rooted in the exact same thing as this podcast has always been, is celebrating the art of podcasting, celebrating audio storytelling and getting voices out there, sharing and creating a bigger community and having ultimately this impact on so many different people. And so that is the reason that these episodes haven't been coming out, is because I've been focusing so much of my energy over there. But over the last couple of weeks, as we kind of roll into 25 for Pod Summit, and as I'm able to take a little bit of a pause, not so much a pause, but I can kind of reshuffle my priorities around, while always trying to keep my family, my wife, my children first here. But I'm able to now spend a little bit more time focusing back on nerd, getting back into the swing of things with consumption of things like trailers and shows and catching up on things, because I'm lagging behind here. And so I'm kind of, if this is your first episode, this is quite a shocking episode, I would imagine. But I'm kind of playing a little bit of catch up here with, I guess, basically the last month and a half. And there's only a few things I'm going to touch on because, as I said, at Pod Summit, I learned so much stuff from my peers and from professionals in the space. And there's a few things that I'm going to tweak here over the next month or two, even bringing in like a producer to help me kind of rejig things a little bit, because I want to form the podcast and continue to kind of evolve it around this idea of the experience and, getting into the universe in a bit more detail, these universes that we love, but also putting a lot of emphasis on the experience into these individual films or TV shows, or kind of the aura that these universes carry, and just trying to immerse ourselves a bit more in the positive side of it, and really develop this idea that we're kind of in this space of immersion where, let's cut the real world out of this for a little bit and talk about these universes that we love. Let's talk about the impact they're having on pop culture, on culture itself, and why we love and why we continue to come back to these universes. And so that's kind of what I want to kind of frame things up around. And so I just wanted to take a quick, I'm dipping my toe kind of into the deep end here, and just kind of going to run with this episode, see where we go, and continue to evolve the Nerd Room. It's a piece that I've spoken about time and time again here, is that I always like to see the formula of podcasts evolving. And as I learn more things, as I get deeper and deeper into the industry, and I'm seeing kind of very cool things being done, I always want us to be kind of at the tip of the spear with all of this. And so I'm going to kind of continue to create that immersive audio experience for you guys, while also trying to have some fun along the way, as we always do here in the Nerd Room. But coming off of this lengthy hiatus, this longest one in almost 10 years, I feel good to be back. I feel motivated to be back, and I look forward to continuing to produce content to keep you company during those moments of that you just need a little downtime, or you're on the commute or cutting grass, whatever it is you do, shoveling snow up in here in Canada. In the not too distant future, I look forward to taking this journey with you guys and continue to ride alongside shotgun with you in all of this. So with all of that being said, for the Nerd Room, I'm Tim, and thank you so much for entering the Nerd Room.
So there you go. You got a little taste of the Nerd Room with Tim Truax. Again, I love that beginning. I love the nerd thing. That's so cool, right?
Bunch of nerds.
That's my new favorite. So definitely go check out the Nerd Room with Tim Truax. And again, a great show to share with your friends, your family, your neighbor, your coworker, the guy that sits across the cubicle from you, the guy at your shift when you punch in and has always got something to talk about nerd stuff. Send them over to the Nerd Room. Throw the headphones on, listen to the show, subscribe, follow, share, do all that great stuff. Let Tim know you're listening to the show, that you found out about his show through the How to Podcast series. Again, he was a guest on my podcast a while back. You definitely can go back and listen to that as well. And also, add Pod Summit to your calendar for 2025. You can do this right now. Podsummit.com is the website. Go and check out all the information for next year's event. The time of recording, I'm recording in October. This is going out November 2024. But you can put this in your calendar. Come join us for 2025. And excited to see where Tim takes Pod Summit, where Tim takes his show, The Nerd Room, and all the good stuff happening for Tim Truax. Everyone go support Tim. Thank you for listening to this. In 30 episodes, 30 days, we're getting there. And I love throwing a spotlight on great podcasters like Tim Truax and The Nerd Room. So I love being a podcaster. I love meeting these great people. And I love the fact that you press play on this episode and that you're still here. That tells me that there's something here for you. And if you're like, Dave, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this community, and I want to spend some time with you. There's a link in the show notes. It's just for you. You and I can get together and chat about your podcast, answer any questions you have. And the most important thing is we get to meet each other. So if you feel like you've been podcasting alone, you should never podcast alone. You should podcast in a group. We have a community just for you. And I, Dave, would love to be part of your community. Howtopodcast.ca is where you can find me, find our amazing community, and meet the people you've met here today on this episode. So, what are you waiting for? Stop podcasting by yourself. reach out. I would love to talk to you. Happy National Podcast Post Month. We'll talk soon. Thank you for being part of the community, and thank you for listening to this episode. howtopodcast.ca. Take care.